Hello everyone, I'm Katie Contos and welcome to today's webinar, which is hosted by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Today's webinar is focused on the nuclear innovation, clean energy future, creating opportunities for cross-sectoral cooperation. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar features. For audio, you have two options. You may either listen through your computer or over your telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. If you choose to dial in by phone, please select the telephone option and a box on the right side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. If anyone's having any technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinars help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. If you'd like to ask a question, we ask that you use the questions pane where you may type it in. Also, the audio recording of today's presentation will be added to the YouTube channel at the link provided on the slide. Today's webinar agenda is centered around the presentations that provide an overview to the Clean Energy Ministerial and information on the NICE Future Initiative. Before we launch into the presentations, I'll provide a quick introduction of today's panelists. Then following the panelists' presentations, we'll have a question and answer session where the panelists will address questions submitted by the audience. Now I'd like to provide a brief introduction to today's speakers. First up, we have Dion Cameron, who will provide an overview of the Clean Energy Ministerial and an introduction to the NICE Future Initiative. Dion is the Director of the Nuclear Energy in the Ministry of Natural Resources, Canada. Following Dion, we will have Ken Inoshi, who will tell us about the current status of the initiative. Ken is a Senior Assistant Director of the Nuclear Energy Policy Planning Division at the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy at the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. And following Ken, we'll hear from Sarah Lennon, who serves as the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for the International Nuclear Energy Policy and Cooperation in the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy. Sarah will discuss how you and others can engage in the exciting initiative. And with those brief introductions, I'd like to take a moment to pass the controls over to Dion to welcome to the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dion Cameron. I'm the Director of the Nuclear Energy Division with the Federal Government of Canada. And it's my pleasure to start us off with our presentation today on the Nuclear Innovation Clean Energy Future Initiative, or as we like to call it, the NICE Future Initiative that we are launching under the Clean Energy Ministerial framework this year. I'm going to get us started with an introduction to the overall Clean Energy Ministerial framework, or you might hear me refer to it as CEM, C-E-M, Clean Energy Ministerial. Following a very brief introduction to the CEM framework, I'll provide an introduction to the NICE Future Initiative before handing over the microphone to my colleague from Japan, Kensuke Onishi, and he will provide us with the current status of the initiative, and then Sarah Lennon from the US DOE will conclude the presentation with opportunities and a challenge to you and to your organizations to engage with us on the CEM. So starting first with a quick introduction to the CEM framework. CEM is an international initiative between member countries. There are 24 member countries plus the European Commission that have signed on to CEM. The member countries represent approximately 90% of global annual clean energy investment and also represent an estimated 75% of global carbon dioxide emissions, making this a very important international forum for addressing climate change and clean energy challenges. But it's a unique forum. It's characterized by distributed and shared leadership, and I'll talk about what that means in a moment. The initiatives are voluntary and collaborative. Notably, there are no negotiated communiques, And the framework is very flexible. So what does this all mean? This means that that countries get together under the CEM framework in what amount to coalitions of the willing. So, oh, I don't know what's just happened. Okay, I'm assuming someone will alert me if you are unable to see the slides. So the CEM countries get together in what amount to coalitions of the willing. So any individual initiative is launched by and driven by a subset of CEM member countries. Those countries that are interested in a particular topic can get organized and launch initiatives and campaigns around that topic. There is no consensus text that is negotiated among all CEM member countries. There's no negotiated consensus advice. This is not a forum where countries negotiate commitments as they do under the COP framework for climate change. This is a collaborative, constructive space where we can get together and launch initiatives that advance our shared priorities. And so that's what we're getting together to do on nuclear energy this year. The collaborations are quite flexible, as I mentioned. They allow for the inclusion and participation of private sector, of civil society, and collaboration with multilateral institutions. And we're bringing all of those modalities into the work that we're going to launch on nuclear energy. There are, however, annual meetings of ministers. Ministers have been meeting annually to discuss the initiatives, to receive progress updates on the initiatives, to adjust course, and to launch new initiatives since the first meeting in 2010. This year's CEM meeting in 2018 will take place in Copenhagen in May 2018. And I'll just note at this juncture that that's where we're going to launch the Nice Future initiative. And 1 year later in Vancouver in May of 2019, Canada will proudly host CEM 10. And we will have an opportunity at that juncture, having launched the initiative 1 year prior, to really showcase our progress and to give nuclear as much profile as we would like to give it when we convene in Vancouver in 2019. And so with that brief introduction to the overall framework and how it works, I'm now going to get into the Nice Future initiative and tell you what it is that we're convening to do. Let me start with setting out a brief rationale for the Nice Future initiative. Let's start by simply acknowledging that nuclear energy is an important contributor to global clean energy supply, and that it will continue to play a role in meeting future clean energy goals. We all know this to be true, but even so, strategic planning for future clean energy systems often doesn't include discussion about nuclear energy. Countries get together at CEM, they get together at COP, they get together at Mission Innovation, and we talk about our objectives vis-a-vis climate change and vis-a-vis clean energy future, but nuclear energy is often not part of that conversation. And as a result, there's a need here. There's a need for countries to get together to launch a dialogue on the role of nuclear alongside other forms of clean energy, to bring nuclear energy to the main discussion. With this slide, I've set out a couple of international initiatives or international fora where countries already get together and talk about nuclear. But you'll notice all of these are nuclear-centric fora. The Nuclear Energy Agency, where 33 countries get together to advance scientific, technological, and legal bases for safe, environmentally sound, and economical uses of nuclear energy. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, where 169 countries participate and focus on safety and security and negotiated consensus guidelines for promoting those objectives. Generation 4 International Fora, a smaller group of countries, 13 countries plus Euratom, working on R&D for the next generation of nuclear systems. IFNEC, the International Framework for Nuclear Energy Cooperation. These are all constructive and useful international fora for discussing nuclear. But essentially what happens here is countries send their nuclear experts to these fora, and we talk amongst ourselves. Mission Innovation is related to CEM and worth noting here. 22 countries and the European Union. Mission Innovation was a commitment in 2015 for countries to double federal spending on clean energy R&D by 2020. There are some collaborations, but mostly mission innovation was about an international commitment to go home and domestically advance work. So what this slide is intended to demonstrate is that there is a niche for SEM. There is a niche and there is a need to bring nuclear energy to broader discussions about clean energy policy and clean energy objectives, and that is the SEM opportunity. This is an opportunity to launch a policy dialogue that cuts across energy subsectors, including nuclear, bringing it beyond existing fora where we talk amongst ourselves, amongst nuclear experts, and engage the broader clean energy policy makers more broadly. It's also an opportunity to bring nuclear to a ministerial discussion. The previous tables that I mentioned, most of them are not being convened at the ministerial level. It's an opportunity for collaboration and for knowledge sharing among coalitions of the willing, as I mentioned before. And at SEM, there's flexibility to include countries in our initiatives that are not members of SEM. So there's incredible flexibility. Not only can we include member countries that are party to SEM, we can include non-member countries, we can include private sector, civil society, and other international organizations can contribute as well. But most importantly, it's an opportunity to reach across the aisle, so to speak, and to bring nuclear to non-nuclear audiences. We want to start a dialogue on the role that nuclear energy can play in bolstering economic growth, energy security and access, and environmental stewardship in support of global clean energy goals. We want to build a dialogue between nuclear, renewables, and other clean energy policymakers, and ensure that at the highest level, discussions about global clean energy policy objectives include and reflect the full set of options and acknowledge the realistic trade-offs between energy sources. The idea here that there is no silver bullet, that there is no perfect solution, and that there is no solution that one size fits all. That we need to be looking at fact-based, evidence-based, and we can be optimistic, but we have to be realistic about what our options are for addressing climate change and clean energy goals, and nuclear has to be part of that discussion if we're going to be serious about the discussion. And so we've scoped out an initiative, we've proposed an initiative that allows for consideration of the role and contributions of, on the one hand, full-scale nuclear power for baseload electricity. Here we're thinking mainly existing Generation 3 systems and the important role that they play on existing grids. But we also want to allow for consideration of next generation advanced nuclear technologies, innovations that are coming down the pipeline, so to speak, including hybrid systems that integrate nuclear and renewables in both electric and non-electric applications. So hybrid systems for combined heat and power, small modular reactors, and everything else that is coming down the pipe in nuclear innovation. We're proposing to allow, to structure our work, around 4 focus areas. 1, activities that promote technology briefings, technology valuations for policymakers. Essentially, this is about plain language briefings for policymakers so that at the highest levels, policymakers are well briefed on coordinated energy systems, innovative technologies, storage, and uses. Second area of focus, engagement with policymakers and stakeholders regarding energy choices for the future. Third area of focus, economics, including market evaluation, market structure, and financing questions, especially for next generation nuclear. And fourth, communicating nuclear energy's role in clean integrated energy system. In a nutshell, all of this, each one of these areas of focus has to do with plain language briefings about the potential for nuclear, what it is, what it isn't, what the future may hold realistically, what it may not hold realistically, bringing those plain language briefings to new audiences at the ministerial level, across the aisle to renewables and clean energy policymakers, and to public and stakeholder organizations. And with that introduction to the nice future, I'd like to now hand the responsibility, the mic, over to my esteemed colleague from Japan, Kensuke Onishi, who will talk to us about the status of the initiative. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Dan. Hello, everyone. This is Ken Onishi from Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. I'd like to talk about the current status of our initiative. Next slide, please. So we, US, Canada, and Japan are conducting the following three main works to prepare for the round shot, the SEM 9th. Number one, engagement with countries who show their interest in joining and with diverse groups and organizations. Number two, the development of the work plan for the first year. Number three, preparing a side event at the SEM 9th on May 24th in Copenhagen. I will introduce each of these with the following slides. Next slide, please. And country, 13 SEM member countries plus 4 non-SEM members have indicated their interest in this initiative. These countries include UAE, South Africa, Russia, Romania, Poland, Argentina. And we would like to welcome non-SEM member countries as well, such as the latter 3 countries. Next slide, please. About engagement with diverse groups and organizations. Our initiative will work with a wide range of organizations, which focus on policy and technology in both nuclear and non-nuclear energy fields. Our initiative will invite views of members of industry, research organizations, and civil society, such as think tanks, environmental organizations, and communities. Next slide, please. We are preparing a draft work plan for the first year, which describes our areas of activity, concrete activities, and operating agency, as well as the way to participate in the initiative for countries and support organizations. Regarding the areas of activity, to advance its strategic objectives, the initiative will undertake works in 3 categories of activities. Number one, initiate a cross-sectoral dialogue among experts and energy policymakers on nuclear energy's role in clean energy systems of the future, encouraging participants to share information, best practices, experience, and perspectives. Number two, develop and disseminate resources for policymakers, including the development of reports, tools, and other resources to inform clean energy planning programs and decision-making. Number three, building partnerships through outreach and engagement activities, leveraging events, online platforms, social media, and other networks and audiences to broaden and multiply the impact of Nice Future through public-facing channels and media. The scope of the work plan allows for a focus on both the role of full-scale nuclear for baseload energy services, as well as the next generation technologies, including integrated renewable nuclear energy systems and non-electric applications. In addition, the Nice Future initiative will explore 4 cross-cutting themes. A, technology evaluations of coordinated energy systems, innovative technologies, storage and uses. B, engagement of policymakers and stakeholders. C, economic and financial analysis. D, communicating nuclear energy's role. Next slide, please. Then, regarding our specific activities and key deliverables for the first year, we expect the three main pillars. Number one, initiate a cross-sectoral dialogue on nuclear energy's role in clean energy system. This category will convene energy experts, policymakers, and industry from across the clean energy sector to join a discussion on the current and potential role of nuclear in support of the clean energy goals through a variety of conventional and innovative applications. Currently, discussions on nuclear energy take place in predominantly nuclear-only fora. Under the SEM, the Nice Future Initiative provides an opportunity for a policy dialogue across energy subsectors to bring nuclear energy beyond existing fora and inform policymakers more broadly. In the first year, we seek to initiate a cross-sectoral dialogue by hosting a keystone events or workshop to bring experts, policymakers, and industry together. We are currently planning to hold an event at the SEM 10 to be held next year in Canada. Moreover, Japan will host a multilateral meeting called as the FNEC in November this year, and we are considering to have a co-host event with the Nice Future. Also, we are launching a webinar series to establish a virtual forum for sharing information and best practices across the clean energy sector. We would like to have webinars around once a month with various themes. And second, develop and disseminate resources for policymakers. The goal of this category is to ensuring energy policymakers have access to resources and information on the opportunities and challenges associated with the full range of options available for meeting clean energy goals. We will develop tools and resources to provide policymakers with the information necessary to evaluate the full range of clean energy options, including emerging areas of nuclear technology innovation and potentially applications for those technologies. In the first year, we will produce a progress report that captures current and expected future nuclear innovations and their potential applications in integrated clean energy systems. We will also work to include nuclear energy under the SEM Clean Energy Solution Center's Ask an Expert service. Number three, building working groups and partnerships through outreach and engagement. This category will focus on outreach and engagement with broader non-expert groups to raise the profile of nuclear sector's clean energy contributions. In the first year, we will seek to achieve this by identifying opportunities to expand existing clean energy conservation conversations by establishing partnerships that can be leveraged to multiply the impact of our initiative, and by taking the conversation to a broader online audience. The Nice Future Council is a kind of supporters network for the initiative, and Sarah will explain its detail later. Oops. And
thank you, Ken.
Thank you. We will hold a side event on the initiative at the SEM 9th on May 24th at the 1 p.m. The page 20, please. Thank you. And the program is still under coordination, but we assume the following agenda. Remarks by high-level representatives of lead as future countries, namely US, Canada, and Japan, and embarking and emerging country perspectives, remarks by supporting multilateral organizations, industry, and research institutions, and art and ideation by the third way. In addition to these, we will have a photo session with heads of delegations at 1:25 p.m. before the opening of the event, as well as one with high levels, including those who join late. I would like to ask the countries taking the heads of delegation to arrive at the venue in time. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide for me. And as I mentioned, there will be a visual exhibition and introduction by the third way, an US think tank. Here, I would like to introduce this picture a bit as an example of the future integrated energy system. This is called as the data center scenario. The yellow boxes in the middle are advanced nuclear reactors. You can also see solar panels on the roof of the buildings. Moreover, some space for the addition of reactors are secured in advance to adjust the power sources in accordance with expansion of the capacity of data center. This system would have less concern about fuel transport than conventional thermal power plants. So next, US will talk about the way to participate in the initiative. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ken. This is Sarah Lennon from the Office of Nuclear Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. And now that you've heard what the initiative is and why it is, I thought I could talk a little bit about how people and entities can get involved and our structure that we're currently envisioning for the initiative. Next slide, please. So very briefly, our structure, it's simple, it's flexible, and relatively informal compared to a lot of other international groups or organizations or initiatives. As you can see, we have our guiding principles. Well, first, NREL, who is hosting this webinar, and we appreciate their help as an operating agent already before we formally launched. And we envisage them as an operating agent to continue, but there could be opportunities for other organizations to provide some support in the future as additional operating agents. Again, SEM is very flexible in that sense. So our guiding principles, it's voluntary. People or countries can engage in whatever piece they are interested in. It's non-binding for a country. One of our key focus or key principles is that this is for shared contributions. We encourage countries or entities to identify an idea, a concept, an activity, and basically run with it. They take the responsibility for an activity, and that leads to the next principle, which is any participant who comes up with some idea or wants to participate in an activity, they maintain full authority over the resources they choose to invest in the initiative and its activities. And final point is transparency. We will be using the SEM Secretariat and NREL to share information in a timely, transparent manner. And just to reiterate, we do not have an authoritative body saying what should be done or what must be done, and not all who join the Nice Future initiative have to participate in each and every activity. Whatever suits your needs or interests, we encourage. Next slide, please. So we want people to get engaged. As Ken mentioned, we have developed a draft work plan for year one, and it's a work in progress, and we're happy to share that with interested folks. The initiative, we are supports engagement with governments, industry, civil society, cross-sectoral. is one of our buzzwords, as is flexibility. So we're looking to get engagement across different sectors, from government, academics, nonprofits, industry, and there are four different areas or ways to get involved. First bullet there, you can see sharing information. There could be existing reports that an entity has developed that might not have been shared or discussed or socialized across sectors, that provides technical and economic information that might relate to one of the four key focus areas that Dion mentioned earlier on. We want people to participate in events that we are developing, or partner with other countries and entities to develop other engagements, events, or opportunities. And share, and this is one of the key things, sharing outcomes with your own networks beyond the strictly nuclear networks that we have been so focused on. So just reiterating, Dion mentioned this in the beginning, I think Ken touched on this, cross-sectoral, flexibility, those are the real key pieces for this initiative and why we think this is really a fantastic new idea. Next slide, please. So there are two different ways to get involved, countries and then other participating entities. For countries, very simple. They can state their intention at the ministerial or at the side event that will be taking place in the afternoon of May 24th, as Ken just mentioned. They can reach out to Canada, Japan, or US representatives, and our contact information is at the end, and just let us know. And same thing really for the non-SEM member countries. Reach out to us and we'd be happy to add you to our list of participating countries. Next slide, please. So for industry and civil society, a little bit different. We are looking for that kind of engagement to involve written proposals submitted to the lead countries, and you can see at the bottom of the slide there where you can get more information about that and where you could submit proposals. And these proposals obviously should align with the objectives and the principles of the initiative and target the key audiences for our initiative. And really activities that might, that might include clean energy stakeholders outside of the nuclear sector and expand the conversation, take it broader. Those are the kinds of things that we're really looking for. So we really encourage that. And Dion started out the webinar saying we have a challenge for you, and our challenge is this: be creative. We want, think outside the box and be innovative. That's, it's built into the name of the initiative. So we know there are a lot of good ideas out there and a lot of great organizations and networks that we want to tap into and benefit from the work that has already perhaps been done, and look at it in cooperation with nuclear in a different way. Next slide, please. And Ken touched on this briefly. We are looking to establish a council, and the objective is to work at the strategic level with our stakeholders across the coal clean energy sector to provide, this council would provide guidance, suggestions, and help share and disseminate information. The council will include, people, organizations who are looking to develop clean energy systems. Sorry, hang on one sec. Developing clean energy systems, operating these clean energy systems, or we want the end users of the clean energy produced by these systems. So this could be multilateral organizations, industry, and one key point, the bottom note there, is that the council is not intended to obtain consensus views. This is not a consensus-based organization. Next slide, please. I think I touched on this a little bit on an earlier slide, but we want the NICE Future Council to look at the alignments of the activities, alignment of the mission, purpose, activities, the value added, and the balance of representation is really important. So we want nuclear and non-nuclear obviously represented on this council. Okay, next slide, please. And here are some of our brainstorming topics for our webinar series. These are just initial ideas that we came up with, some organizations that we'd like to get involved, but we really want to hear from you. We are absolutely open and encouraging other topics to add to our webinar series. Okay, and final slide. You can go there, and that just has our contact information, so feel free to reach out to any of us. And we look forward to participation and engagement and questions now, I suppose. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks to each of the panelists for the outstanding presentations. As we shift now to the question and answer session, I just want to remind our attendees to please submit the questions using the question pane at any time. We've had some great questions from the audience, so we'll use the remaining time to answer those. For the panel, let's begin with, how does the nuclear energy considered to be clean?
This is Deanne Cameron from Canada, and I can take a stab at this to start.
Wonderful.
It's a great question, and it's a very common question. So it obviously depends on your objectives and your objectives in trying to advance clean energy deployment. From Canada's perspective, carbon emissions are a central consideration in this regard. So we, in Canada, we have included nuclear energy in our definition of clean energy for the purposes of our mission innovation pledge, and also more broadly. And the reason we've done that is because we know that we cannot meet our Paris commitments without nuclear. Nuclear plays a critical role in displacing large amounts of carbon emissions from what would otherwise be fossil generation, power generation in Canada and around the world. So that's really at the core of the matter from Canada's perspective, is the potential of nuclear energy to displace massive amounts of greenhouse gas emissions and to help us meet our climate change objectives. That said, there are other considerations at play when we think about clean energy. We have to think about environmental impact more broadly on land, water, and local air quality. And in this regard, from Canada's perspective, we feel very strongly that we have an excellent and rigorous track record with respect to safety and security, and we have a plan for long-term management of radioactive waste that protects the environment and protects humans. So that's how we have come to the conclusion, and we are comfortable promoting nuclear energy as an important source of clean energy.
This is Sarah from Department of Energy, and I would just echo what Deanne said, and just note that nuclear power produces around-the-clock, zero emissions energy, no pollution, no particulate smog, no nitrogen oxide, sulfur oxide emissions, and right now it generates 60% of our carbon-free electricity in the United States. So we definitely consider this a clean energy, clean and green.
Wonderful. Thank you both for answering that. Our next question from the audience is, what are the panelists' thoughts on engaging nuclear fusion research with this initiative?
So this is Deanne from Canada. The initiative certainly does not preclude consideration of fusion as a clean energy source. That said, this is not an R&D initiative, so we already have other fora where we advance nuclear R&D. For example, under mission innovation, we have a commitment to double spending on on clean energy R&D, and for Canada and for other member countries, some of us have chosen to include nuclear in that commitment. We also have collaborations that we advance under the Generation 4 International Forum, though none of those specifically deal with fusion. They do deal with next generation nuclear S&T, nuclear R&D. We feel that the niche for SEM is to really bring nuclear briefings to the policy table. And so this is about challenging people's mental models about what nuclear is and isn't, and informing them with fact-based, evidence-based, and in earnest about the trade-offs of nuclear energy options and innovation that is coming down the pipeline. So to the extent that fusion energy is an option that's coming down the pipeline with a certain deployment timeline in mind, that could be part of the briefings for policymakers. So it could be part of the initiative in that sense. But so there's nothing precluding fusion, but to be clear, this is not an R&D initiative.
Thank you for following up with that. Our next question is, how does nuclear energy compete with renewables on the upfront financing needs?
That is actually, I mean, that's a great question, and that's a question that we are wrestling with here in the department. And one of the key focus areas for the initiative is to look at exactly that, look at how nuclear is valued and what kind of market structure would make nuclear more affordable. Financing options could be discussed, and if we start looking at new advanced reactors, smaller reactors that might be more financeable, less costly than the current fleet of large reactors, that could change the dynamic as well and change the competitiveness of nuclear. So that's exactly, we don't have that answer yet, but that is certainly one of the main questions we're going to be talking about in this initiative.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next question is, what is the NICE Future Initiative vision for millennials and the next generation of leaders of the nuclear industry?
We want to hear from you. So if there are participants on today's webinar that are part of the International Congress of Young Generation Nuclear, or the North American Young Generation Nuclear, or any other millennial networks around clean energy, whether you're on the nuclear side of things or on other energy subsector sides of things, our challenge is absolutely directed to all organizations, but especially to next generation. In Canada, we know that the next generation of nuclear workers and leaders are a passionate group. They're passionate about climate change. They're passionate about making an environmental difference. And so our challenge to you is take a look at at the concept here. You know what our broad objectives are, and go back to your organizations, talk about what you might be able to do. If you have activities that you can organize, and they fit with the priorities of the NICE Future Initiative, and especially if they reach across the aisle and bring nuclear and renewables to the same initiative, to the same table, and you've built that cross-sectoral element into your activity, we would be delighted to give that activity profile through the ministerial process.
Yes, I think absolutely. There was a conference not too long ago where Canada and the U.S. participated in a dialogue. It was at the International Youth Nuclear Congress, I believe, in Bariloche, Argentina, and there was great interest from millennials and from women's group. I think Women in Nuclear participated, and we 100% look forward to working with the next generation of leaders for the nuclear industry. And the grassroots efforts that some of these organizations have already developed, I think, is going to be a fantastic way to spread the word about our initiative, and some of these folks have already sort of seen the light that nuclear is clean, and that dialogue has started in some of those organizations. So I think the more we spread the word and link up these different organizations, the better off we'll be.
Wonderful, thank you. And we've had a lot of, to follow that question up, we've had a lot of audience members ask, how do they get involved in the initiative, and is there a chance to meet people behind the initiative, and how do they get invitations to these events?
I believe we have we are developing a website. We are in the final stages of having this website up and running. It'll probably happen right after the initiative, but folks can check out. There are a couple of links in the slide presentation about how you can get more information, and there will be a sign up possibility to be on a distribution, a mailing list, information about upcoming events. I know we've got folks who will be at the side events in Copenhagen, and there should be many different opportunities, but I would say that the best first start is to sign up for our distribution or mailing list, or reach out to us by email, and we can make sure that folks who want to meet and get involved, that will happen.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Our next question is, what is being done about the waste?
Well, I can start that. I'm sure my colleagues have comments on that as well. Waste it's a vital issue when you're talking about nuclear, but because it is strictly a nuclear issue, and it's being dealt with in a number of fora already, it is not a focus of this initiative. Every country that may be participating or interested in joining Nice Future Initiative has different national circumstances. So while we recognize it's an important aspect of the broader nuclear picture for the purpose of this dialogue, it's not a focus.
I would just like to add a little bit of nuance around that. So this is Deanne from Canada, and Sarah's absolutely right to the extent that addressing legal frameworks and technological frameworks for nuclear waste management or radioactive waste management is not the central focus of this initiative. It's a little bit like the question about fusion. We work through the IAEA and through the NEA on international collaboration with respect to radioactive waste management. We have domestic regimes for that management, and I would say that the Canadian adaptive phase management approach for radioactive waste, long-term radioactive waste management is something to be benchmarked against. That it is a very high standard, and we have an excellent record, and we're making excellent progress in Canada on this front. So all of that is true, but within the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial and the Nice Future Initiative, part of our objective is to provide plain language briefings to the public and also to policymakers and to ministers. And so we will endeavor to develop products that address those types of questions, because that is frequently the first question that people ask when you want to talk to them about nuclear and they're not nuclear experts. They want to understand about waste management. And so while we're not going to be breaking new ground on waste management under the STEM initiative, part of our objective here is to make nuclear energy understandable and accessible to new audiences. And so that'll be part of our challenge.
Great, thank you both for following up on that. Our next question is, can you expand on how the Department of Energy aids with nuclear fleet maintenance?
Nuclear fleet maintenance. Sure. There is a very a strong focus within the department and within the Office of Nuclear Energy to keep our nuclear fleet going We are advancing nuclear energy technologies. We are looking at targeted early stage investments to help ensure a strong domestic industry now and into the future. We have a lot of industry-informed R&D looking at challenges to the future of nuclear, but also looking at ensuring that our current fleet can continue providing the excellent clean baseload power that it already does. We are looking to leverage public-private partnerships, and we are thrilled with our partnership with our national laboratory system and looking to develop an advanced nuclear infrastructure. We're looking at how to make the supply chain resilient and really develop and promote a strong nuclear pipeline for future nuclear reactors. So we're looking at the current fleet, we're looking at advanced, what comes next, and the supply chain. So those are the three kind of big areas that Office of Nuclear Energy is focusing on.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Our next question is, what about the non-proliferation concerns?
This is Deanne from Canada. Yes, what about them? I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I believe the audience, the question is, does the NICE initiative address the non-proliferation concerns, the crossover between the energy and the weapon use?
I see, okay. So I would say no, not directly. That is not presently contemplated in the scope of the SEM NICE Future Initiative, at least as I understand it, or as it is presently envisioned. We work at the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, with I think it's 169 countries, to develop international standards and regimes for ensuring the highest standards of security and nuclear non-proliferation and safeguards. And so we feel that is very well in hand through that framework. And so this is really about now, so the extent to which it would be an issue in SEM would be the same answer that we gave with the question about fusion and the question about waste management, is that if policymakers have questions or concerns about security and nuclear non-proliferation, we would attempt to answer those questions. But really, this initiative is about bringing nuclear energy to clean energy discussions and making sure that policymakers, especially that are forward-looking and developing policies and incentives for the deployment of low-carbon technologies, are making those plans in a manner that is well informed by the full optionality of energy options, including nuclear. So this initiative is not going to break new ground in terms of nuclear security standards or anything like that. That is very well in hand through the IAEA.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is, what is your view on small modular reactor companies participating in the NICE initiative? And what protocol will they follow? And also, have they become commercially available?
I would be very happy to answer that question. So again, this is Deanne from Canada, and I would like to take this opportunity to give a hat tip to the Canadian SMR Roadmap, which is a domestic initiative that we are convening, a pan-Canadian roadmap that has participation from the federal government, subnational governments, industry, our laboratories, our regulator, because we see SMRs as a promising area of nuclear innovation and an important area where new options are going to become available for clean energy production. And so we think small modular reactors are definitely going to be part of that space. And we would like to make sure that small modular reactors are a part of the discussion under NICE Future at SEM. So there's absolutely scope to do that. Now, in terms of how the private sector can participate in the NICE Future initiative, the challenges out there to your organizations to propose activities or events that would advance the objectives of the Nice Future Initiative. They will be looked upon even more favorably if they represent partnerships, if you are able to bring something forward that is a collaboration between the nuclear sector and the renewable sector, for example, something that that helps to build that dialogue, then bring your proposal forward, and we will be very, very happy to consider it and give it profile, and especially I think SMRs have to be a part of the conversation, so don't be shy about bringing forward an activity around SMRs.
I would just say absolutely. We believe that that SMRs, the dialogue needs to include SMRs. As I mentioned in the slides earlier on, we're looking at reactors that might be more financeable and less upfront costs for a country that might be considering nuclear power, but the cost and siting of a large nuclear power plant of the current fleet variety might not be feasible. So perhaps an SMR in the future, in the 2020s, would make it more approachable or more reachable for countries looking to develop nuclear power. And we're looking at the possible linkage between nuclear reactors and clean, other renewables. So you have a hybrid or integrated energy system where you might have a reactor that would be teamed up with a hydro plant or wind or solar, so that again it's more flexible, and you might be able to put it in places that wouldn't be able to host a larger nuclear power plant. So absolutely, and I echoed Dion's challenge to come up with some ways to put together some kind of activity or study or dialogue in the future. And for the U.S., I know NuScale is expecting design certification, I believe, in early 2021. And then hopefully shortly thereafter, they would have a ready-to-build model that would be commercially available. But that is, when that would be commercially available is not really within the purview of the Department of Energy, but we are certainly supporting and supportive of SMR efforts.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think we can squeeze in maybe one more question today in our final minutes. What happens to the spent fuel, and can it be safely stored?
I think this goes back to the question before about the waste. I think countries have, yes, it can be safely stored. Different countries have different approaches and thoughts on this. Again, this is not one of the focus areas for the NICE initiative, which is trying to get nuclear included in the dialogue of clean, green energy. There are other organizations that are studying that issue that is a strictly nuclear issue. For example, I know in IFNEC there is a workshop or there's a working group looking at the back end issues. So the short answer is yes, it can be, but it's really not part of the dialogue necessarily for the NICE initiative.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you again for that awesome question and answer session. For any questions we didn't have a chance to get to, we'll connect with those attendees offline after the webinar. And I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our expert panelists today and to our attendees for participating in today's webinar. We very much appreciate your time and hope in return that there are some valuable insights that you can take back to your ministries, departments, or organizations. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and we hope to see you again at future NICE events. This concludes our webinar.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, everyone.
So